So thank you for coming. It's nice to see so many people here today, and I know we're in a busy term for everybody. Tina couldn't be here because she had other commitments to attend to. So I'm Bryony, I'm one of her colleagues in the ECI Energy Group. The next in the seminar series is going to be back in the usual room downstairs in the diversity room, and that's going to be Andy Ely from the University of Manchester talking about social mandate for reducing energy demand, I believe is the title, which is based on some citizens' assemblies that he's been working on. And today we have a very interesting and topical talk from Pramod Kogonekar. He's a distinguished professor of electrical engineering and computer science at the University of California on AI data center growth, challenges and opportunities for electric power systems. So I'll hand over to you to introduce me.
Thank you, Bryony, and good afternoon, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here to speak to you about this topic. I'm doing a sabbatical at Oxford for 3 months, and Anton is my host, so I'm just very excited to be here. A few caveats and apologies. This is a US-centric talk, so everything I say is about what's going on in the US. I think some of it has some bearing to what's happening in UK and Europe, but I really won't talk about it at all. So please forgive me for being such a US-centric. It's more because that's all I really know on this topic, and also because the electric power systems vary dramatically from place to place, and even within the US they vary dramatically. So it's okay to. Can you hear me? Okay. Excellent. Okay. It's not working now, is it? You can just stand there. That's all right. No, even this is not working. Even the keyboard is not working. Oh. There you go. Point it down. Point it down. Okay. So in the next 40-some minutes, I'm going to try and make sense of practically daily headline that you will read in any of your newspapers. Certainly in the US, we see this every single day. So just 4 charts. On the left top is a Financial Times article saying that lots and lots of data centers are either being canceled or they're not progressing, they are being delayed, etc. Bottom left is a Bloomberg headline saying that Texas issues dramatic power demand growth projections. You will see those numbers. On top right is state by state. States are passing laws to regulate data center development. And then top right is a positive story from Google saying how Google is building all these AI data centers with clean, smart, affordable energy. So you will, rest of the talk is basically to help you understand what's going on. And so outline of my talk is, first I'll sort of set the whole situation up with this whole growth thing that's happening. Then what are the major challenges is in connecting it to the power grid. So my focus is only on the power grid side of it. Then I'll talk about 2 specific directions that hold a lot of promise. One is flexibility, and the second is tariff design. And then finally, I'll conclude with some bigger observations. So this is the good place to begin. This chart shows growth of electric energy in the United States. And as you can see, after the Second World War, there was steady growth till about 2000. And after 2000, it's been basically flat at about 4,000 plus, roughly 4,000 terawatt hours annually. And so we have been, so the grid has been operating in this era of essentially flat consumption, slight change, maybe 1% growth. There is a small uptick you see towards the end, and we are sort of the beginning of that growth period that we are witnessing. I also put down some numbers so that you get an idea about how it compares to the rest of the, not quite the rest of the world, but like say UK, so that's like 342 terawatt hours, and then EU is slightly smaller than US. China is practically double, more than double, and then India about half of of US. But the main takeaway here is that we have been in this kind of flat electric energy consumption. And although I didn't show it on that slide, it's also an aging grid. So the US grid is an aging grid, about 100 years old. Lots of stuff is not in state of good repair because it takes investment. And so we have this aging grid, flat consumption, and that's getting now hit by a CapEx boom. So on the left are forecast capital expenditures by the big player, Meta, Alphabet, Microsoft, Amazon, and Oracle. There's a full article. It talks about will AI data center boom become a $9 trillion bust? It's in Financial Times in March, because everybody's worrying, how can this keep going like this? How can we keep spending money like there is no tomorrow? On the right-hand side is actually a breakdown. So this is 2026. This is today. This is this year's dollars that are being spent. And we can assume that this is actually quite accurate because this money is into this year's budget for all these big companies. Just the top four is $640 billion in 2026. And in fact, that number has gone up. This was before the quarterly reports that came out a couple of weeks ago, and every company has ratcheted up their planned expenditure for this year. So that number is probably close to $700 billion. Where is that money going? So of course, roughly 65% of the money goes into the IT equipment. So like chips, memory, all the computation, networks, etc. And then remaining goes in infrastructure. So buildings, land, roughly 100 billion of the 640 is in electrical power infrastructure. So very large, very substantial amount of money is going to get spent this year on building the electric power infrastructure. So these data centers are everywhere. This is actually I can show it. It's actually a live chart. So if you go to that website that I have at the bottom, you can actually see, you can click on it on a place, you can see what are the data centers there. So it shows all over the US. I just want you to focus on a big cluster in the Northeast near Virginia, Pennsylvania, because I'll talk a lot about that. There's also a big cluster around Georgia. And then you got Texas. And then you got some new players coming in, say, Indiana, Illinois, New Mexico. And some of them are 10 gigawatt plus. So very, very, very large data centers are either in planning or conception. So over the last couple of years, ever after ChatGPT, people realized that this is going, if this all takes off, and people thought it was going to take off, they started to project what is going to happen to electricity consumption. And a whole bunch of projections started to come out in around 2024, 25, 26. And you can see an enormous, so this chart is taken from EPRI. EPRI stands for Electric Power Research Institute. It's a nonprofit funded by utilities in the US. So they pool their money, and it's a kind of a research arm for electric utilities in the US. And you can see, and they're projecting to 2030 for now. And they go beyond 2035, 2050. So you're at the high end, BCG, which is forecasting about 1,000 terawatt hours. Remember, US total consumption today is 4,400 terawatt hours. So BCG at the high end by 2030 thinks it's like 1,000. EPRI high is 800, EPRI medium is 600, and then you got EPRI low at 200. Enormous spread. So that's one thing I want you to take away from this talk is there is this enormous spread on what we think is going to happen, how much electricity we're going to consume. Let me not say much more here. Yeah, there is going to be a link. I'm going to put the slides on the website so you will be able to download and see this. Let's keep going. What are the sources of the uncertainty? Why are we so uncertain? Why do we have like such a huge spread on what we think is going to happen? So here, outline some of the biggest drivers of this uncertainty. So number one is, what's the future demand for AI technologies? Is it huge? Is it medium? Is it low? We don't really know. Right now, we are in kind of an optimistic period. So because of Anthropic success and skyrocketing revenues, people think that, oh, this technology is going to have a huge market. And then, of course, Anthropic is not the only player. You got OpenAI, and you got Google, and you got Amazon and others. So there is this issue of like, how big is this market going to be? How widespread is AI going to be, not just in the US, but across the world? Then there is competition among AI companies. So all these AI companies think they are going to take most of the market. So they're all planning, kind of thinking that, oh, I'm going to get a big chunk of this. So I'm going to plan my power needs and my compute needs, thinking that I'm going to be one of the winners. So you got this thing that causes uncertainty about, like, can we really assume that all of them are going to get? That's not going to happen, right? Some will get some will therefore not get. So there is this thing that's causing uncertainty. Finally, I say third area is improvements in energy efficiency. So chip makers are not standing still. They are trying to improve energy efficiency. And if you look at NVIDIA, I don't have that. Because of time limitations, I didn't include the data. But if you look at energy efficiency of per flop computing, it's like orders of magnitude improvement over the last few years. So that we don't know how far that curve goes down. Plus, could there be completely new ways of doing computation that would be much more efficient? And if that were to happen, maybe our energy demands won't be that high. Fourth thing that's happening is there is a shift going on right now. We are moving from training, building big training data centers to inference. So a lot more is going towards inference. And again, we don't know what the cost of inference compute are going to be in terms of power and so forth. So that's causing additional uncertainty. Fifth and sixth, do we have enough chips to build all this stuff? So people do a bottoms-up analysis. How much can NVIDIA produce? How much can Google produce? How much can Micron produce? How much can Samsung produce in terms of memory? So GPUs and memory, can we produce enough to build all this stuff? So that's another source of concern. And finally, the piece that I'm going to focus on is, can we provide power to all this stuff? So, and not just power, but it's like generation, it's electrical infrastructure, it's permitting of the land where this stuff is going to get built. That's causing all this uncertainty. Okay, so we're going to focus now on electric power systems. There are four major things we want to make sure we do as we manage this growth. Number one, far and away, is reliability. We do not want lights going off at odd times. We are so used to running our whole civilization on electric energy that this reliability has to be extremely high. And this is going to be like the driving force behind what I have to say. So can't compromise on the reliability, at least not blindly. Got to make sure that we are doing it with our eyes open. Second is, we can't have the costs filter down to consumers. They are not the ones who are building this stuff. So we want to make sure that we protect the consumers, especially residential consumers, because especially for the poor, the lower half of economic strata, this is a big part of their annual bill. So we can't have that happen. Third thing is, if AI is going to be this game-changing technology that changes the whole world, we want to enable economic growth and competitiveness. And then finally, we want to do this in an environmentally sustainable manner. So we want to power this stuff in a way that we don't make our problems worse. All right, very quick introduction to electric grid in the US. It's split into essentially four parts. There is part to the west of Rockies, there is part east of the Rockies, there is Texas by itself, and then there is Quebec. These four parts are a single system. Okay, so this is a single engineered system that's connected at 60 hertz. So every few milliseconds, this grid is synchronized. So this is not like, just a collection of things that are loosely connected. No. This is an extremely tightly connected. It's the biggest marvel of an engineered system is a power grid. These are continent scale systems that are synchronized at extremely high frequency. So they just work at a single time. There are two different regulatory agencies. One is Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, FERC, and then NERC, North American Reliability Corporation. And then there are states. And this is extremely complex because energy and electricity, states have a certain role, federal government has a certain role, and they all kind of work together somehow to keep the grid going. And then we have the other dimension, which is some parts of the US grid are deregulated. So they run competitive markets, and then there are other parts that are vertically integrated utilities. So they have everything, consumers to generation, and they operate as a single company. So it's kind of a mix of regulated and deregulated entities. So NERC, which manages the whole US reliability thing, I plotted some chart that just came out a few weeks ago, which shows how the projections for 10-year growth have changed in the last 3 years. So it used to be that in 2022, we thought we will have 55 gigawatts by 2030, or well, I guess it's 10-year growth, so maybe 2035. We've gone from 55 to 24 gigawatts. So our expectations or what we think is going to happen to the growth is just year over year just increased. So disclosed data center pipeline is 241 gigawatts. US installed capacity is like roughly 1,000 gigawatts. Okay, we're talking about a 25% increase in installed capacity. 33% are under active development. 183 gigawatts of signed construction and electricity supply agreements. And Texas and PJM, and I'll talk about PJM in a second, are the two big players, and they have 72% of this. So I'm going to focus on two regions, PJM and Texas. PJM stands for Pennsylvania, Jersey, Maryland. Just to give you an idea, it covers 13 states, 67 million people are served by this entity, PJM, and you got generation capacity and so forth. Its big responsibility is called an RTO, and there are 4 big responsibilities that PJM has. Number one is reliability. You can make sure that lights stay on. Transmission planning. They have to plan transmission across states and high voltage connection, operate the system, and then they run markets. Because it's a deregulated region, they run markets for both energy and for capacity. Just like in the NERC chart, again at PJM, they're seeing the same thing, that the load growth projections used to be fairly flat, but then in the last 3 years, they've just dramatically jumped. So Wood Mackenzie, which is one of the big energy consulting firms, just released data, 55 gigawatts of large load growth by 2030 and 100 gigawatts by 2037. If you saw the data on the previous slide, current installed capacity is about 165. So this is a very, very large growth that's coming. So PJM, as I mentioned, runs a capacity market to ensure there is enough supply to run the grid reliably. And this is the 3 year in advance. So you run a market today, this year, to assure supply 3 years from today, because it takes a long time for generation to come online. It used to be a very, stable, reasonable market. In fact, even prices went down for a while. This is per megawatt year. So how much does it cost to have 1 megawatt for a year in whatever future year? In last 3 years, this number just exploded. Last auction was last fall, and the numbers came out to 121,000 per megawatt year. It's like if you go to the low, it's like 5-6 times increase. And it was because it is capped at that number. If there was no cap, estimates are that this price would be 194,000 per megawatt year. That was not all. It fell short by 6.6 gigawatts. So they had a target how much they wanted to procure to make sure that they have enough supply to meet their demand 3 years from now, 27, 28, and they didn't get enough. And there was hardly any new supply coming into the market. And then the conclusion that there are big reports as to what happened, what went wrong. It's become a huge problem. President Trump and states of all these 13 states got together and told PJM they had to fix this problem. And PJM is under fire, and I'll show you more about what PJM is doing. because of this big failure of the capacity market. So just 2 weeks ago, they released a report, very nicely titled, Powering Reliability Through Market Design. Okay, so like a 70, 80 page deep dive into what has happened with the reliability and capacity market. And they ask 3 really, really fundamental questions. Until now, we had this, roughly speaking, and just hold the thought. You acquire enough supply to make sure that the grid works reliably. And it's like a common good. Everybody gets advantage of having this supply so that the lights stay on. So that's what they ask the question, is it a common good? And if it's a common good, who's going to pay for it? Because prices are going dramatically high to bring enough capacity. Second, until now, we treated reliability is the same, practically same for everybody. It's not quite so. There's more nuance there. But in an age of scarcity, should we ration this? And what are we going to do? The second question. And the third question is really about capacity markets. Should we move from capacity markets to energy markets only? That is, should we bring the money not through capacity, but through charging customers for actual energy use rather than capacity? And then they have 3 paths that they are not proposing as the solution, but they are proposing as you have to think. Number 1 is a vast amount of load is managed through long-term forward commitments. Not through market, you just make deals and just manage your demand that way. Second is differentiate reliability. And the third is go from capacity market to energy and ancillary services market. That's the story in PJM. The story in Texas is even more amazing. So this is ERCOT. ERCOT is the electric reliability company of Texas. Texas has an advantage. It's disconnected from the rest of the nation. They're on their own grid. It's a single state, so they don't have to worry about a lot of interstate stuff. And they can use their own laws to manage their grid. So it gives them a lot of flexibility. On the left are projected growths, 410 gigawatt worth of projects they are tracking. Now, not all of this is going to happen, but this is what is in their queue. And 87% of these are data centers. So very large fraction. So what's the state of play in Texas? As I showed in the previous chart, 410 gigawatts in official queue as of April 26, of which 87% are data centers. 99 projects exceed gigawatt. Okay, 99 projects among these are large gigawatt scale. 69 gigawatt, I got rid of that mega, added in the last 12 months alone. 198 gigawatts filed since January 26. This is like kind of that gold rush thing that's going on, that everybody's filing to say, I want to build a data center. I want to come and build a data center because I see a market. Texas did this very big thing. They passed a bill. It's called Texas Senate Bill 6. I put a hyperlink to it. It is asking ERCOT and related entities to come up with interconnection standards. So this work for any load that exceeds 75 megawatts, what are the interconnection standards to connect them? And that work is currently underway. And there are 2 pathways they are thinking. This is all current process. Controllable load. So one pathway is your data center becomes a load that the utility can or ERCOT can control. I can move you up and down as I desire, or bring your own new generation. You bring your own generation, and then we can talk about how you can connect to the grid. And there was really interesting construct under development called withdraw limited private use network. So you connect to the grid, and you have your own generation. You might have your own batteries and solar and so forth. And what we're going to do is we are going to put a limit on how much you can take from the grid, upper limit on how much you can take from the grid. Beyond that, we may not give you. So that's sort of the concept they're working on. It's probably all going to come out in the next few months. Having talked about what's going on in these two big jurisdictions, I just want to kind of summarize the challenges to the grid. First of all, there are these very, very big costs and lead times for building and upgrading the transmission and distribution grid. It takes time. It takes years sometimes to build this stuff. There are long queues on the generation side. So you got solar farms and batteries and so forth. They're sitting in queues to connect to the grid, and it takes time. Long supply chain delays in gas turbines, in transformers, in substations, in reactive power equipment. So everywhere you look at in the supply chain, there are like huge delays. Stuff is just not available, or it will take you 3 or 4 years to get it. And we have to maintain grid reliability and resilience in the face of these expansions, inherent nature of data center loads. I'm not going to go down this path, but these data center loads are very different than normal loads, normal data center loads. They go up. So you can have like a gigawatt or 500 megawatt data center go from full power to very low power in an extremely short amount of time. These are huge transients. This part of the problem, I'm not going to talk about it as an electrical engineer. This is a very interesting direction. And then, of course, rising cost of electricity. So the big problem is the timing mismatch. On this chart, you see like how many years it takes to build transmission, generators. Fastest is battery. It takes about 3 years. So if you have a bunch of batteries, you can put them in about 3 years. And a data center takes about 2 to 3 years. But everything else is like mismatched to 7, 8, 10 years versus data centers that want to get connected in 2 to 3 years. So there are many, many pathways to this future. And this chart shows you all different options. To the top right are all the stuff we can just do inside the data center. So more efficient software, product design, advanced cooling. Can we make it more efficient? They are getting, by the way, it's amazing. The very advanced data centers are extremely energy efficient with PUE getting down to like 1.07, 1.08. Pretty amazing. Hardware improvement, better chips. So all that stuff. And then you have bring your own power, which is, so on the x-axis is like how fast can you do this? Speed and cost. So fast and low cost versus impact on the ratepayers. So you don't want to be here. Yes.
I have a question regarding the previous slide.
Okay.
So for the mismatch, and considering that there is no, I think there is new kind of freezing the permission for renewable generation, specifically in Texas, that it's can be really, solar specifically can be really promising. How can you see that this timeline would be changed? Because if they are freezing some kind of permitting for.
On the one hand, there is pressure to make permitting easier.
Yes.
On the other hand, there are
the new regulation, specifically in April, I think it was.
It was in Texas, you said?
I think it's. I should check that it's in the Texas, but I think it's something national. Maybe I should check that this U.S. judge something. Trump administration did something for this permission, but I'm not sure that this is for specific states or generally. But I heard that it would have significant.
So there is the federal government that has.
It's a state issue. Just because Trump says something doesn't mean he can do it.
No, she's talking about the FERC permitting reform that they've been working on, which would do the federal permitting, but only for stuff that goes inter-region between states.
Yeah.
It's not going to do anything for this.
Okay.
My opinion.
Okay, so the big worry is we will overbuild the grid and then consumers will end up paying for it. So we don't want to do that. It's slow, expensive, and high cost. So we want to come up with solutions that are better than these. So I'm going to go down 2 different directions that hold a lot of promise. And the first question begins with how can I get more out of the existing grid? So I already have this existing grid with so much generation and transmission and distribution. Can I get more out of this? This is the very recent report from Pareto. They call it the untapped grid. It's not like a really detailed analysis. It's like a high-level analysis, but they make 2 simple points. Roughly 50% of the grid is unused because the grid is designed for peak load and we are not at peak load most of the time. Grid is peak load plus another 15 to 20%. So you got this capacity to serve the peak load plus an additional safety margin. And most of the time we are not doing that. So they say, well, we are not using the grid. And if you were smart and figured out how to use the current grid, you could even reduce the bills for the taxpayers. I mean, for the consumer. So can we get best of both worlds? So I'm going to show you some results that are coming out, which kind of support that idea. So this is the recent paper, 2025 paper from Duke by a fellow by Tyler Norris and his colleagues. So they begin with this curve. It's called the load duration curve. If you've never seen it, basically on the x-axis is number of hours in the year. So up to here is 100% of the hours. Here it is like very few hours. And what fraction of the peak load are you at for that amount of time? So by the time you get to the 100%, it's like share of peak is down to 30%, which is like at night. You are at peak load only for a very small fraction of the time. Very few days or few hours are you at peak load. By the time you come up to, like, say, 5%, you're down to 80% of peak load. So they use that to do an analysis. And the headline result is we can serve 100 gigawatt of additional load just using the existing grid if we were smart. And they break it down by various ISOs and RTOs, and then southern states which don't have this structure. So it varies from region to region, and I'm going to show you some of their key takeaways. 76 gigawatt of new load if you allow 0.25% of annual load curtailment. Now, we will quantify that with in the last couple of bullets. So if you allow curtailment of load for 0.25%, you can add 76 gigawatts. And if you allow more, you get 126 gigawatts. And 98, you get 0.5%. Average duration of load curtailment is 1.7 hours for 0.25%, 2.1 hours for 0.5%, and 2.5 hours for 1%. So amount of hours that you will be curtailed is relatively modest, given you got so many hours in a year. And also, when you curtail, your curtailment is only 50%. So it's not like it's really killing you. You can still continue to serve some amount of load. Their analysis did not include constraints of the electric power system due to transmission and distribution. So one of my colleagues, Ginger Quinn, and his students, they recently wrote a paper. They showed that if you put some network constraint on the same analysis or a similar analysis, what you can do goes down, but still very significant. It's still like 61%. It's still you can have the network constraint and still serve a large amount of load, but not as much as the Norris paper suggests. Now, so that's on the grid side. On the data center side, how might you deal with? I mean, how might you make this flexibility happen? So there are assets. You can have on-site generation. You can have on-site battery. You can have on-site thermal storage, cooling systems, standby generation, and then compute itself is a source of flexibility. And then it shows how much is possible. This is from RMI, Rocky Mountain Institute. As a result of some of these efforts, EPRI that I mentioned earlier has an initiative called DC Flex Initiative, Data Center Flexibility Initiative. So EPRI will demonstrate how data centers can support and stabilize the grid while improving interconnection and efficiency. So I'm going to show you the latest that has come out of this DC Flex initiative. So first, to give you, so this is the paper that just came out in, it appeared last year, but just got published in Nature Energy a couple of months ago. First chart shows that if I throttle the power that a GPU can consume, how much do I lose in throughput of serving the machine learning query, let's say. Let's say we're doing inference for now. And so if you are at the maximum, you get full throughput, If you reduce it to like 75%, you still get 0.25. Now, you don't want to go that low, but you can go somewhere in the middle. You can lose a little bit of your throughput and reduce your power consumption. So this kind of work is appearing in computer science. So they take that idea, and then they did this a real world demonstration in Arizona. So this is May 3rd, 2025. This is Phoenix. So very, very hot day, likely. This is the peak power. So these dots are the peak power. In the afternoon, between 5 and 6, you hit the system peak of roughly 5 gigawatts. That's the time you are going to need data centers to cut down their power. So they said, okay, you give us an order and we will execute. So of course, this data center doesn't have 4.5 gigawatts to give, but it says, okay, if you give us an order to reduce, we will see if we can reduce it. So they reduce their consumption by 25% for the duration. Well, actually, they start an hour before and they stay on an hour after to reduce their consumption by a given amount. And so that's ability to reduce load on demand. And then they had how they did it by managing jobs and curtailing the throughput and so forth. And there are 3 tiers of flexibility. So this is this is extremely high priority load. So that was like practically 100%. There was no change. And then flexibility, flex 2 was reduced a little, flex 3 was reduced a lot more. So they can differentiate between different kind of loads and manage different kind of loads to give you an overall flexibility. As a result, well, I don't want to say as a result of this, as part of this big flexibility thing, NVIDIA announced something what they call DSX Flex AI data center architecture. So they're turning this into a standard part of their offering. So you buy a data center built out of NVIDIA chips, it will come with your ability to modulate its power consumption. They call it DSX Flex. What they're doing, which is very interesting, is they're building kind of a demonstration lab, if you will, a demonstration data center in Virginia, 96 megawatt data center. So this is not a gigawatt scale giant thing that aims to show peak load reductions of 20 to 30%, long duration curtailments, multiple events on one day. And this is underway, and it's probably going to get built. I don't have the timeline on this, but not in too distant a future. And this will become like a way to demonstrate capacity to be flexible. As part of this move towards flexible, I think this is my last chart. There is this idea of a flexible connection. So you connect your data center with a flexible contract. So you're guaranteed this much power in dark color. You're definitely going to get that much. Then there is conditional firm. They'll give you above and beyond that, and if some conditions are met, and then the rest of it you have to, and then there's an approved connection as to how much you are approved for, and you have to make up for whatever we cannot give you, you have to figure it out for yourself. So they take this idea of flexible connection and power purchase agreements, and they come up with these estimates that grid power available for 99% of all hours, on-site resources. Batteries are a huge possibility in this space. Batteries can make all the difference. Generators, load flex, transmission constraints. So again, sort of going in this direction of flexible. One final point on this, and then I'll move to the tariff design and then close up. There are a lot of things still to be done. Even if this all works out, there is still an enormous amount of work that needs to be done to make this thing practical. From the grid point of view, grid reliability being the biggest, but the economics of this are actually very, very challenging. So there is something, there's a recent article by Hans Royal. He came up with this idea of compute heat rate. So if you're in the electricity business, you know, there's a gas heat rate. Essentially, it says, okay, what's the economic value of consuming gas to generate electricity? And it's about $30 to $50 per megawatt hour, approximately. It depends on the gas price, but you can sort of come to that number. He said, well, you know, what's the economic value of running an AI computation? And so I don't want to bother with you with all of these columns, but just stay on this column. So effective value of a megawatt hour for frontier AI inference, because think Anthropic's Claude, whatever Sonnet, is $53,000 per megawatt hour. $53,000 per. That's the value for Anthropic or OpenAI. And then mid-tier inference is 8,000. Enterprise agentic AI is 8,000. These are astronomical numbers compared to what grid is willing to pay for reducing your load. So PJM, in their thing that I showed you, reliability through blah, 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 they say the economics of curtailing is just not favorable because the maximum they are willing to pay under stressful condition is 3,700. So there is a lot more that needs to happen. So the biggest positive, if this is all going to work out, is not how much money you can, like, is it economically viable? It is how fast can you get on the grid? If I can connect to the grid in 2 years instead of 7 years, that has enormous value to these data center operators. Okay, I'm going to move to cost. So the second sort of theme is how do we protect the consumers? So the issues are how do we ensure that additional costs are not, they're fairly allocated. Now, right now, the process of allocating costs is extremely complex. It's a mix of federal and state regulations. There is mixed evidence so far whether AI centers are actually increasing residential costs. And then there's possibility of stranded costs. If we overbuild, who's going to pay for this? So tariff design has become a major direction. So AI data center operators directly negotiate with utilities through very, very opaque processes. You really don't know what, it's all private. A typical tariff is a demand charge and an energy charge. So you pay for just how much demand you are going to put on the grid. You may not consume anything, but how much demand you're going to put on the grid, and then you will pay for how much energy you consume. The demand charge is a transmission charge, distribution charge, and a generation charge. And then there is an energy charge that's related to actual energy consumption. And you want to have multi-year contracts. We have a working paper that's about to be submitted. Our main thesis is that the bill demand should be ratcheted. The data centers request grid capacity, and they don't know how much demand they're going to have. They're doing it optimistically, or they've got some internal models to say, okay, how much are we going to need? Utilities have to make investments to provision, and the realized demand may be much lower than the requested capacity. So bill demand, so this is just the demand charge part of it, not the energy charge, is the maximum of realized actual demand and the minimum bill demand. Basically, if you have some minimum bill demand, then you can create a payment floor that the data center has to pay and cannot, even if they don't use it, they have to pay. And then this minimum demand is subject to approval by the Public Utility Commission that sort of regulates it. So this is an example result that we have. On the x-axis is the minimum bill demand as a fraction, a percentage of the nameplate demand. And on the y-axis is worst case rate increase on the rest of the consumers. As your minimum bill demand goes up, the exposure of the residential consumers goes down, as you would expect. And so we have models to create these curves, and our general conclusion is that it takes about 90% if you want to be sure that the consumers are not going to be impacted. So higher minimum bill demand makes data centers financially responsible for reserved capacity. Risk-free protection. If you want to really, really reduce risk on the residential consumers, you have to charge data centers close to 90% or above. Typical proposals that are being floated in places like Ohio and Virginia and elsewhere is talking about 80 to 85% demand charge. So we think this is okay, but not great. So it still leaves some exposure to the ratepayers. So I'm going to now sort of conclude. So US electric grid is going through a major transformation of the kind we have not seen in a very long time. And data centers are a big driver. Regulatory policy, both at the federal and states have a big role in this because of the structure of the US system, is that states get to have their own regulatory policies. So that's going to make a huge difference. Grid data center planning, reliability. I think reliability is going to be a huge part of this puzzle. Already there have been incidents in Pennsylvania and elsewhere where all 15 data centers went offline at the same time. And although the grid didn't collapse, but if you don't manage the reliability part, this is going to be a big problem. Operations and control will remain major topics for the foreseeable future. Done right, if we solve this problem right, with the amount of money that's going to get spent, this could actually turn out to be a positive. To close, I'm going to go up a couple of levels and talk about this this real opposition to data centers. So on the left is a map from quarter by quarter, how many data centers are being canceled in a given quarter. So that's at an all-time high. 20 data center projects canceled due to local opposition. 7 in 10 Americans oppose local construction of AI data centers. So the data centers have kind of lost the public. I think one reason is all the energy and water. I didn't talk about water because there was a speaker here who talked about water. So I decided not to talk, and I don't work in that anyway. But there are issues of impact on water and energy. And that second reason they have lost the public is because everybody's afraid for their jobs and what's going to happen to society and so forth. So I think all this talk of super AGI and all that stuff has made public very leery of data centers. So you see public really opposed. And then there are states that are considering data center pauses or bans. If I lift myself up one level higher than AI data centers and this, electric power systems are a critical infrastructure that supports society. You really cannot imagine a civilized life without electric power. AI data center build out puts great pressure on this system. Okay? Great pressure on the system. Large sectors of our energy world can be electrified. So we've only talked about AI data center because it's here and now, but you talk about electric vehicles, residential heating, and manufacturing industry. If you think about electrifying all of those and look at the energy footprint, electric energy footprint of those, that's like 2 orders of magnitude greater than the AI data center stuff I'm talking about. So if you really want to make this happen, the impact on the electric grid is going to be much more significant. Electrification is also furthest ahead in terms of decarbonization. I mean, we actually have technologies here and now that can decarbonize. You've got wind, solar, and batteries are the answer. Right now, batteries is where the action is. Batteries have become so cheap. You can do so much with them that, yeah, we can do some of this stuff. So if I balance all this electric energy growth, especially if you want to go down these bullets 3 and 4, is a major opportunity for positive change if we do it right. And I think that if is a big if. I'm going to close with these 2 quotes. I don't feel like reading them to you. On the top is a positive version, which says that, look, we are not going to solve the grid crisis. Remember I began by saying flat consumption and aging grid. Our grid is aging. And it requires investment, and we need to do something to make sure that this infrastructure actually works well for our people. So we are not going to stop this by stopping AI data center construction. So he says, well, we better use this opportunity where hundreds of billions of dollars are going to get spent. Let's make sure that that gets spent in the right way to build a grid for tomorrow. And then on the other side, you have the rapid, largely unregulated rise of data centers to fuel the AI and crypto boom is disrupting communities. All the reasons why you should worry about this. Both, I think, have elements of truth to them. So it's not as if it's an obvious thing. And so I come back to sort of my main thing, which is, if done right, this is the big opportunity. With that, I thank you for your attention.